The morning I walked into our family company's conference room and watched the screen go dark on 53 employees' access credentials, I felt like someone who had finally finished reading a contract she should have studied years earlier. My name is Delia, and I spent 11 years building what started as a two-room IT repair operation in Portland into a regional software firm. I did not inherit that number. I manufactured it the way you manufacture anything durable, through obsessive attention, through days that began before sunrise and ended long after the building's HVAC system shut off, through 1,000 small decisions that each looked unremarkable and together became something people in our industry whispered about with a kind of reluctant respect. Let me explain what I mean when I say I built it. My father, Leonard, had opened the shop when I was 9. He fixed laptops and desktop towers in a cramped space wedged between a dry cleaner and a pizza counter in a strip mall off Burnside. I grew up behind that counter. I learned to diagnose failing hard drives by sound before I learned to parallel park. When other kids my age were at weekend parties, I was cataloging customer complaints, noticing patterns. The real problem was always information. Who had it, who needed it, and how slowly it moved between the two. My sister Reena moved in a different atmosphere entirely. She was 4 years older, effortlessly magnetic, the kind of person rooms reorganized themselves around. She went to a prestigious business school in Boston, graduated with honors, and took a position at a consulting firm in New York that paid her more in 1 year than my father's shop earned in. When she came home for holidays, she carried herself with the particular confidence of someone who has been told repeatedly and by credible institutions. She was never cruel to me, exactly. She was simply unconvinced by me, in the way that people who have won one kind of race sometimes struggle to recognize that other races exist. I had been designing custom logistics software for mid-sized regional companies for 3 years when I noticed something my father had missed entirely. His clients were using our service as a stopgap, not a solution. They needed integrated systems that connected inventory management to customer accounts to invoicing in real time. I built one. Quietly, the way I did everything. A small company that distributed medical supplies tried it, and their monthly admin hours dropped by 40%. Word moved. Then it moved faster. Within 18 months, my father's repair operation had become a software company in all but name, and I had been running it in all but title. My father gave me the title of Chief Operating Officer when the revenue crossed $8 million. He kept the title of Chief Executive for himself, which seemed reasonable. He had founded the company. He understood the original architecture of the thing. What changed was Reena. She came home for my father's 60th birthday, and I noticed immediately that something was different. She asked careful questions about our client contracts. She asked how our licensing agreements were structured. She called our largest client directly, something she had never done, and described herself in that call as a senior partner. I heard about it afterward from the client's procurement director, who mentioned it in passing, puzzled, because the description did not match anything on our website. The birthday dinner was held at a restaurant in the Pearl District. 60 people, a private room, the kind of event Reena organized beautifully, because she understood the grammar of occasion in a way I never bothered to learn. Halfway through the main course, she stood and offered a toast. Have you ever been in a room when the temperature changes without anyone touching a thermostat? That is what happened when she moved from the toast into something else, a speech, really, directed at the assembled clients and investors my father had invited without telling me the dinner had become a business event. She said the company was entering a new phase. She said growth of this scale required leadership with a broader strategic vision. She said, looking directly at me across the white tablecloth, that technical talent and executive leadership were different disciplines and that no one should be expected to master both. My father did not contradict her. He nodded, in the way he sometimes nodded at things Reena said, not with agreement, exactly, but with a kind of comfortable surrender, the posture of a man who had decided long ago that she knew something he did not. I left the dinner calmly. I put my napkin on the table, said goodnight to the guest nearest me, and walked out to my car in the drizzle that Portland produces in October as reliably as taxes. I did not cry. I opened my laptop in the parking garage and began reading the documents I had authored and signed, and in several crucial cases, structured in ways no one had fully examined. By 2 in the morning, I had confirmed what I suspected. The core software platform, the product that generated 88% of our revenue, was owned not by my father's company, but by a separate entity I had incorporated 4 years earlier to hold my intellectual property. My father's company had a licensing agreement to use it. That agreement contained a renewal clause. The renewal date was 11 days away. I did not renew it. I also owned, through share transfers my father had signed without reading closely during a financing round 2 years prior. He had been in Boston that week for Reena's promotion ceremony and had asked me to handle the paperwork, which I had accurately and completely, in documents he had not opened before signing. I sent an email at 4 a.m. to every client, every department head, and every senior engineer. The email explained in neutral professional language that I was separating my intellectual property into a standalone entity and would be reaching out individually about transition arrangements. I wrote it the way I wrote everything, without drama, without adjectives, without a single sentence that could be characterized as an attack. Reena called at 7 a.m. I did not answer. My father called at 7:04. I did not answer. At 8:15, our company's outside legal counsel called, which was how I understood that Reena had already retained an attorney. The counsel's voice carried the particular neutrality of someone who has been briefed on a situation and found it worse than expected. I answered that one. By midday, 14 of our 22 major clients had responded to my email. 12 were moving their contracts. 2 requested calls to understand the transition timeline. Reena and my father arrived at the office at 11. I was already in the conference room. I had the relevant documents displayed on the wall screen when they walked in, not to perform anything, but because it seemed more efficient than handing them paper. My father sat down slowly when he saw the equity summary. He looked for a moment like the man I remembered from the repair shop, the one who fixed other people's problems with his hands and charged fairly and never quite understood why the business struggled to grow. I felt something for him in that moment that was not anger. With Reena, it was different. She stood at the end of the table and said, with a control that I genuinely respected, that I had deliberately engineered this. I told her I had not engineered anything over years. I told her I had spent 11 years building something real, and that I had built it in ways that were legally sound, because I was the person who read the contract. I told her that I had made my plans in the 12 hours following the dinner, not before, because until the dinner I had not understood what was required. There were 2 paths forward, I told them. They could contest my ownership position, which would result in litigation that would accelerate the client losses already in motion, or they could accept a separation structure in which they retained their equity stake in the operating company, which would be worth considerably less without the software license, but was not worthless, and I would continue the license on a paid basis for 18 months to allow an orderly transition. When a country house my grandmother left me. They took the second option. Reena did not speak to me again that day. The 18 months passed. My separate entity, I named it Clearfield Systems after nothing in particular, because I no longer needed the name to carry any family weight, grew faster without the structural complications of the original arrangement. We crossed 100 million in contracted annual revenue before the transition period ended. My father retired. We speak occasionally in the careful way of people who love each other, and have stopped pretending that love resolves everything. My mother asks, sometimes, whether things might have gone differently. I tell her honestly that I don't know. I know what happened and why. I am less certain about the alternatives. Reena is in Denver now. I hear through the particular grapevine that connects people in our industry that she is doing well. I hope that's true without sentimentality. She is formidable in ways that simply found the wrong application for a long time. There is a framed photograph on the credenza in my office. It shows the original repair shop, my father behind the counter, me beside him at 14, holding a circuit board in both hands like an offering. I keep it there not as a monument to anything but as a kind of technical reference. A reminder of the tolerances I learned to work with before I knew what tolerances were. I think about that photograph sometimes when people ask me what the experience taught me. The honest answer is that it confirmed something I already knew but hadn't trusted: that quiet people doing real work are not invisible. They are invisible because the people around them find it convenient not to look. I wonder if you've read this far. Have you ever been in a room doing something essential and watched someone else take credit for the atmosphere you created? If so, I am curious what you decided to do about it, and whether, looking back, you think the decision was yours to make, or whether the situation simply arrived at its own conclusion and carried you with it.